We are recording.
All right.
Go for it.
Thank you all for coming. Anybody who's listening, thank you for listening in. My name is Brian Kinslow. So I'm a physical therapist at a business I own with my wife, Abby, who's a dietitian called EVOLVE Flagstaff. So we, for a while, I had a hard time describing what we do. We kind of settled on that we're an integrative facility where we try to bring together all the things that will keep people healthy, hopefully long term. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about today is what does it mean to be healthy in the first place? And what are some actionable things that you can do or even just start to think about in order to move your health in the right direction, no matter where you are on the spectrum of health. But why I call it defining healthy, we're going to do an exercise here in a second, is that often we have some ideas of what that might mean, but those ideas are sometimes based in either popular culture or outdated science or a lot of different things. So we're going to try and break down first what being healthy really means, at least how we define it at our business, and then some things that you guys can start on and hopefully take away from today's presentation. Sound good? Anything else you guys want to cover today? Because we got a small group, so we can be pretty interactive.
I feel bad eating this fast.
I
The help there.
It smells great.
It's terrible.
That's really good.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. Yeah, first rule is that we don't judge shame anybody, so it's all good.
Non-judgment zone.
Totally. Cool. Well, again, thank you all for coming. So let's get going. So that's kind of what we're going to do today. Understand what it means to be healthy, explore some of the factors that define and determine health, and then hopefully give you guys kind of a roadmap of where to get started. And the first day, we're going to cover a lot of different things, and I don't want anybody to walk out feeling overwhelmed, like, oh, there's so much I have to do, because for all of these, you can. The key to change is to start small. And so if there's anything on here that you're even like, oh, I could probably start doing that. We have a saying that we say a lot, that consistency is better than intensity, meaning it's better to take small steps forward in the same direction over time than a bunch of steps forward and then a bunch of steps back. So big swings are usually not as effective as small steps. However, small steps aren't as sexy, like they're not as exciting. They don't look as good on social media, and so consistent smaller steps sometimes are actually harder to stay motivated to do. But a few ground rules. So first one is actually positive body language, meaning we're going to talk a little bit today about some sensitive topics. One is around how we look. That can be weight, that can be things with aging, that can be height, even it can be a lot of different things. And a lot of that is actually genetically determined. We don't have a lot of control over it. And so we have Abby, my wife, who's a dietitian. She kind of sets the tone for our organization. She practices what's called a body positivity approach, meaning that we're talking about what is health and what it isn't. But just today, we want to just not use any language that might make anybody, whatever body they're in, feel uncomfortable. Questions are encouraged, so interrupt me at any time, because we can go off on tangents. We got plenty of time. And then mutual support. Judith already shared with me some things that she's went through, and so we're all here hopefully to head in the right direction, and we can all get there together. Sound good? Okay. So what is health? Like, what does that even mean? We hear that word a lot, we use it a lot, we think about healthy food maybe, but I'm trying to hear from you guys. Shout out, what are some things that you think of when you think about health or being healthy?
Working at our optimum.
Working at our optimal? Okay. Like, how might that feel? Or how might that
Things
look?
are in sync with each other.
Okay.
You're feeling good physically and mentally. It's like a whole package.
Yeah, so it's your body, but also
Yeah.
some other elements too.
So
Awesome. Yeah,
trying
we'll
to
talk.
feel like, nothing's hurting and you feel good about what you're doing.
Great. Yeah, that's a pretty good answer. Any other thoughts? There's no wrong answers
Can't
here.
top
Even just words and things that we do. Yeah.
And there's like emotional health, social health, kind of like a community, a sense, physical.
Yeah.
even spiritual health and stuff like that. I think there's like now there's like 9 pillars of health.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Shit, you give a talk. That's awesome. Cool. Any others?
How about, is it maybe like tie into like a lifestyle choice?
Yeah, that's a big
Decisions that you make in your life?
too. Yeah, for sure. Cool. Those are some awesome answers. And I'm going to congratulate you guys. What we often get when we ask this question, or what we hear when people come into our offices, either to start on an exercise program, to see a dietitian, or even I hear it a lot when people are coming in with pain or injuries to see me. We often hear some different things because those are pretty well-rounded and balanced. None of those would be wrong. But the things we often hear, often the narrative is more appearance-based. So it's kind of weight-based. I need to lose those 10 pounds, or I need to kind of look a different way or get back to a different weight. It's almost always going back to something, how I was in high school, how I was before I had kids, how I was before I lost my job. And so there's always this sense of trying to get back to a certain way, and it's often appearance-based. And so I want to congratulate you guys, because that's the one wrong answer we would say, is that is not health. So we're going to define today, it's elements of all of what you said. But the key thing is that health is not a number on a scale. It's not a restrictive behavior. And so that's why we'll talk a lot about food, but there is a place for food that's not traditionally healthy if it's fulfilling certain things. And it's not, I also think health's not necessarily a vague idea. I think we can get concrete about why it needs to be healthy, and we'll try to do that today. But the number on a scale is just the biggest one we hear in our popular culture. And there's a few reasons why that's not true. But when we look at, there's a lot of associations, but just because certain body size is associated with a certain illness doesn't mean it's causative. And so instead, what is more causative, so here's a tradition in there, I'm sorry, is that it's either weight or appearance-based. This is kind of a societal idea that we have to look a certain way, but in fact, they're disconnected from some true markers of health. Restrictive, and so this is so common in marketing, that to be healthier, we just have to remove that which is bad. And so that's the gluten-free, sugar-free, low-fat, paleo, raw, we're not even gonna cook things anymore. And then all of a sudden you take all those things away, and then like, well, what do you have? You don't have anything left. And so sometimes people have to remove things if they have an allergy or a certain condition, and then we strongly recommend they work with somebody like a dietitian, because when you remove a big element, even gluten, when you remove that, you stand a high risk of removing some other essential nutrients. But this is so easy to market, because it's easy to pick up a package, and we're guilty of it too. We work in this business of, oh, it's like gluten-free and it's paleo. That's gotta be good, right? But usually they're just like different forms of sugar, and it's all kind of marketing mumbo jumbo. And then the last one is not actionable or sustainable. So the narrative that we got to do a cleanse to reset, so to speak, or that we are going to do a whole month of a certain thing, and then we're going to be healthy at that point. And that's not quite true, because ideally health is lifelong. It's something we can do forever. We maybe could get better at or more consistent certain things, but it's not something that we should yo-yo on and off. And there's actually good research that people who yo-yo diet, who are trying to like white knuckle it through a hard diet, and then they're on and off, and they're gaining weight and losing weight and changing how they eat with big swings, they actually have a higher incidence of obesity, higher incidence of some metabolic conditions like diabetes, and can have other damaging things like high blood pressure and some cardiovascular stuff. So yo-yo dieting and restrictive fat diets are not necessarily benign, and they can actually do harm. And Abby worked in a hospital as a dietitian. She saw at least one patient who just tried the keto diet, just kind of a lower carb, and ended up in the hospital because she I think it was something with her liver. And so so yo-yo dieting is not the answer long term, but it can also have some negative effects opposite of what the well-intentioned person would. So if that's not the narrative, then what is? It was a lot of stuff that you guys said. So health is our behaviors. Health is what we consistently do over time. And that could be health for the better or health for the worse. The body is incredibly adaptable, and it's going to adapt to the consistent stimulus that you put on it. And so we define health by our behaviors, and that's the set of habits that create hopefully resilience over time. Hey, come on in. How are you? Thanks for coming. So just to catch up for just getting here, we were just talking about what it means to be healthy, and we were talking about what health is not, and health is not necessarily a number on a scale or a type of diet or restriction, but health is instead our behaviors. It's what we do. So then the question is, like, what behaviors are most important? What should we do? So we set a couple, like there's some spiritual health, community, some exercise. What are some other things? What are some behaviors that might be good? Intellectual health, thinking, yeah, definitely. Okay, I'll give you some of the answers. So, this is so we have 5, and this isn't not necessarily every possible thing, but we think these 5 do a great job in summing up the most important drivers of health. And these are backed by real research and real science. I think they're harder to market, so that means I think we're onto something, is because it's often harder to sell the consistent things over time. And they do a good job incorporating a lot of the things that you guys said of spiritual health, mental health, physical health. So our 5 pillars. So our first one is movement. So we got to move. Our bodies were designed to move. We evolved as hunters and gatherers. And so our modern environment is a whole lot different than how we evolved. And so movement is essential. There was a study about chronic pain. And in the discussion, they were talking about the mechanisms of what causes chronic pain. And they talked about how the nervous system, certain markers, cellular markers, how when you confined a person and didn't let them move, their cellular markers looked like a disease state, meaning they looked sick when they didn't move. Your nervous system, your cells need to move to have their proper expression. And so we define movement at Evolve as a couple key components. There's 3 of them. So one is getting out of breath. So we got to use our heart and our lungs. And so that's simple right there. The guidelines I have up here are from the US physical activity guidelines. So they're refreshed, I think, every 2 years. The CDC puts together a whole panel of experts from every field. They look at a whole bunch of research, and they say, what is the minimum dose that everybody should be getting? And if we get that, we're going to prevent a whole lot of diseases and everybody's going to feel better. And then they come out with some numbers. And so aerobic exercise, that's kind of your heart, your lungs, getting out of breath. We want to do 150 minutes a week or 75 minutes of more vigorous intensity exercise. So moderate, that's when your heart rate is a little bit elevated, but you might be able to carry on a choppy conversation. So that could be a light jog or a hike with some hills where you might have a conversation where you need to say, hey, give me a second, I'm going to catch my breath a little bit. Whereas vigorous, you're really working hard, and you probably can only get in a word or 2 at a time. So they call it the talk test.
Yes, it's per week, right? Not
Per week.
Okay.
Yep. And then you can do a combination of that as long as they kind of add up to some of those. And so if you're not at those levels, some is better than none. They actually say that expressly at the top of the physical activity guidelines. So start small, and every little bit counts. So these don't have to be all at once, and it's better if it's spread out over the week. It's nice if you can string together at least 10 minutes, but even taking the flight of stairs is something that's better than nothing. A lot of fitness trackers are great because they'll track your heart rate over time. And so there are some heart rate zones that I can share with you at the end if you're interested, but generally the talk test is good. But I encourage you guys to just track how often you're getting out of breath next week or even this week and see how close you are. And then if you're not quite there, just try to improve by 10% each week. You don't have to go from 0 to 60, but just 10% at a time. Questions about getting out of breath? Okay, that's the one usually people are pretty good on. So as a whole, the U.S. unfortunately is not that great at meeting the U.S. guidelines. So how many people do you, or what percentage of people do you think meet the guidelines in the U.S.?
15%.
15%?
34%.
That's pretty close. It's about, well, you would go both kind of right. So about 36% meet the aerobic, but only about 15% meet both the aerobic and the strength training ones.
Okay.
And so what you're talking about. So getting out of breath is one. The second one is we got to use our muscles. So we have to get things a little bit stronger. And so that's where sometimes it's a little harder because people aren't sure quite what to do, when to do it, how hard to do it. And so generally where we differentiate cardiovascular exercise, that's your heart and your lungs working. Using your muscles with some resistance training, that's where we're training the muscles to be a little stronger, but we get good load through the bones, through the tendons, and strength and lean muscle mass are actually two of the biggest predictors of longevity and quality of life, which I think are most important because if we want to live long, we want to have a good quality of life when we do it. So people who are stronger do better overall. And so some guidelines for how to do it are at least twice a week is the minimum that is recommended. And we want to work at what's called a moderate to high intensity. And that means it should be pretty hard. So the biggest mistake I see people make with strength training is they're maybe not sure what they're doing and they choose a weight that's not too heavy and they do some reps and then they're like, okay, that's good, and they put it down. But they never work close to fatigue. They never challenge the muscle enough to get an adaptation. So to get stronger, you have to ask your body to do a little bit more than you've done before. And so regardless of how many reps you do, if you get the muscle close to fatigue, you're going to get some adaptation and some benefit. And so that's a simple prescription, but a kind of a broad rep range. If you only have a set of 10-pound weights, we'll have to be creative in fatiguing things. But that goes for all ages. When we look at recommendations for older adults over age 65, they don't change actually. They're the same. And so across from age 18 until the end, this is the recommendation of we need to be doing some strength training and getting out of breath. For the physical therapy patients that I work with, I find that improving strength is often the number one thing that will move them in the right direction. And then moving throughout the day is what I'm doing. Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask a question. So like child obesity is on the rise. However, when most asked about doctors and things like that, they always have that like, oh, you'll grow into it.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. But at some point it's kind of hereditary and stuff like that. So how would you approach like younger athletes or younger students that like, oh, I want to get fit or whatnot?
Yeah.
You can't necessarily have them go to the gym and squat and stuff like that.
Why not? You could.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it depends on the age. And so guidelines for kids are a little bit different. These are for above age 18. For kids, they need up to 60 minutes of activity almost every single day. And so for childhood obesity, there's a few key factors. One, all that body image stuff that we talked about, we'll talk about a little more, is essential for kids because you can imprint something on them that they'll carry with them for their whole life. And so it's really important not to come across with kind of a diet approach, but to find ways to make exercise fun. Okay. So generally, the younger the person or the younger the child, the more exercise should look like play and the less it should look like a workout. Okay. The closer they are to high school, then you can start like training, but it should still be connected to something they care about. So it's not to get them to lose weight, but it's to get them to be more healthy, to be more active. And then the guidelines for resistance training in kids, again, it has to look like play the younger and younger they are, but teaching good biomechanics and body movements and body awareness, and then starting to get kids, in middle school, handling load. As kids go through puberty, their body awareness changes. And so if you can get them moving in the right ways and getting them stronger at that time, actually the research is pretty good now. You can have a very positive effect. It used to be a thing that you wouldn't want to do any type of resistance training with kids, but that hasn't been shown to be the case anymore. But I think the biggest thing is having it be about play and being healthy. With food, it's different because you want to incorporate it into making meals, making food aware. So there's a whole lot of strategies to make it a holistic approach. The family has to be involved.
And also not cooking McDonald's for every meal.
Totally.
Or Sonic. It says right on the label, meat fresh for
Fresh,
you.
looks fresh.
Yeah, they left the house.
100% at home.
I taught
Yeah.
my 7-year-old how to do lunges, and
Totally.
he does that while he's dancing now.
Yeah.
He just
Nice.
adds it into his
So
dance.
kids love to move. I think it's just giving them permission to move, showing them how to move, giving them games to play. I think yeah. So I'm not an expert on child obesity, but that's kind of the basic, at least that movement. We'll talk about nutrition more in a second.
Yeah, I feel like that's a huge part of the childhood obesity, but parents say, well, there's nothing I can do about it, but well, yeah, you can stop going to McDonald's for every meal.
Yeah.
That's-
Yeah, so it's super complex, but the behaviors, they've done interventions where they haven't even done anything with the child, and they've all done it with the parent, and that has made a big effect too.
I feel like that's
Yeah.
the biggest issue.
Yeah. Cool. Definitely as we go through, if there's other things on that, bring it up. The last thing I'll say on strength training and why it's important is oftentimes when I work with patients who have injuries, or even when we get people in the gym, most people are pretty comfortable picking up a 10 or a 15-pound weight. But I have a bias, and that's to get people comfortable working at a little bit heavier loads over time. And the reason why is because when we walk outside the gym or outside here, there's objects that are going to be 50 pounds or more that we're going to encounter with some regularity. I had a woman who she lives just off the grid up in Downey Park, and she's got to carry 5-gallon water jugs. Those weigh 45 pounds, and they slosh around. Rock salt when it's icy, that can be a 30 or 40-pound bag. A suitcase, a grandchild, a child, a pet. And so it's pretty easy to find objects that can weigh 40 to 50 pounds. And in the gym, there's a concept called a 1-rep max. So that's the most you can do for 1 rep. We don't test that very often in a lifting protocol because risk of injury is a little higher. It's a little harder to recover from. And so it's just not something we do very often, if some people at all, but maybe once or twice a year. But if you have somebody who's never done any strength training with a 30-pound object or a 50-pound object, but then they got to go out and lift something that's 40 pounds, and maybe they have to lift it here and carry it into their house, all of a sudden you're doing at or above their 1-rep max a whole bunch of times. And so when we see injuries from things that shouldn't cause an injury, like going to Home Depot and putting stuff in the car, often it's because people are working right near their 1-rep max for a whole lot more than 1 rep. And so for every age, but especially throughout the lifespan, it's really important to find ways or to work with people who can help you, if that's not something you've done before, to stay strong, because then your risk of injury can really decrease. And that's important because when you're injured, you can't move. And so I see as a public health thing, when people have knee pain or back pain, it's not just pain here, but that affects everything else that they're doing, and they're going to have a cascade of negative health effects because they can't move as much as they want to. And so strength is often a keystone that can open up a lot of doors. And so that would be one thing as a place to start, is there's a lot of great resources here in town. We are one, but there's some other great physical therapists, trainers who can work with people with a lot of different concerns. But that is a great place to start, and you should feel a lot better and different after you do some training. Okay, moving along. So second one, so our first pillar is movement, and we have a couple components. Second component is eat, nutrition. So this is our huge pillar, because what we eat really defines our health. So we have a few kind of rules, so to speak, at EVOLVE. So the first one is what we call eat intuitively. And so that means a few things. One is recognizing what your fullness and hunger cues are. So a lot of times people are eating on the go, they're eating in the car, they're eating quickly, they're eating super salty or sugary foods, all of which are designed to kind of mask some of your fullness and hunger cues. like a Lay's potato chip, there's like a whole lot of science to make you want to keep eating those even if you're full. And so slowing down and paying attention to, are you hungry or are you full? If you just eat slower, you'll start to recognize that you're a little more full. But also, when you go to eat something, just asking, why am I eating this? Am I eating it because I'm hungry and my last meal hasn't been for a while? If yes, then go have it. Am I eating this because I'm stressed? If that's the reason, then maybe do something like a couple deep breaths, a little meditation, a couple lunges or squats, get out of breath for a second, see if you're still stressed, because maybe there's another way to resolve your stress. If you're eating it because you're bored, so there's all types of reasons that we eat. Are you eating it because it's your grandchild's birthday and you want to have a piece of birthday cake and that's really important? Then that could be a perfectly valid reason to eat. So there's all types of valid reasons to eat other than hunger, but we can't know what they are unless we're paying attention. And so that's the first step, is to recognize when you're full, when you're hungry, and what the other reasons why you might be eating are. You don't have to not eat when you recognize them, but at least you're aware, and then you can make an informed decision. And then avoid excessive tracking and restriction. And so this is on there because I talked about yo-yo dieting can cause some problems, but also tracking is not all that accurate. And sometimes it can be helpful, sure, if you're eating really large portions, to track briefly to make sure you're eating an appropriate size. But over time, if we start to track every little thing, food starts to become not food anymore, because we eat for a lot of different reasons. We eat because it tastes good. We eat to satiate ourselves. We eat to be with our family and friends. We eat because of tradition. We eat because of our culture. All of those are the reasons we all love food, or should. And if we just track every little thing, it starts to devalue a lot of that. And then that starts to lead down the road to an unhealthy relationship with food. And there's a lot of different things to unwind from there. And so if we're eating more intuitively, the need for tracking hopefully should be a little less. But if we're not tracking, then what should we eat? And so we call them the building blocks. So we don't want to track every little thing, but most meals and snacks should be relatively balanced. So we have a couple big things. So carbohydrates, those provide energy to our brain. They help to, they're life sustaining in a lot of ways. Low carb diets are pretty popular nowadays, and so that's a whole rabbit hole that we can get into, and I'm maybe not the best person to talk about that. But for most people, eating some healthy carbohydrates, so whole grains, oatmeal, brown rice, quinoa, whole wheat bread, there's a lot of great sources of carbohydrates. Eating protein, so protein sources can include animal-based sources, chicken, fish, beef, pork. They can include fish sources, dairy sources, yogurt, some hard cheeses, or plant-based sources, including beans, nuts, and seeds. Healthy fats, including nuts, avocados, some oils such as olive oils, and then fiber. That's our vegetables, as well as, so that becomes insoluble fiber, helps clear out our digestive system, and then soluble fiber, which is kind of like the fiber in oatmeal. So we want all of those components in a meal, or in most meals, so that way we're getting all the nutrients we need, we're having energy, and at least we see a lot of athletes, not athletes, just individuals in general, Flagstaff, especially with more trend towards plant-based eating, not getting sufficient amounts of protein in. And so eating a plant-based diet can be great for a lot of reasons, but you generally don't want to miss out on some key nutrients. Questions about the building blocks? So it's kind of how you would organize a plate. We want some carbohydrates, some vegetables, a protein source, and then if you're cooking with cooking oil, that covers your fats, or a healthy fat like an avocado or some nuts or something like that. Then we want to eat a variety of vegetables at most eating occasions. So oftentimes people tell us they're eating pretty well. They might have vegetables with with dinner, but don't get vegetables any other time during the day. And so the more times you can eat veggies throughout the day, generally the better you're gonna feel, the healthier you're gonna be. And so can you work some veggies into your breakfast? So that could look like this morning I had some whole wheat toast, a couple fried eggs, and just sauteed some kale really quickly and put an over easy egg on it. Took 5 minutes and it was pretty good. We've done a breakfast kind of hash bowl with some roasted veggies. Or even just done a couple carrot sticks here and there. So it doesn't.
Spinach is great with eggs.
Spinach, yeah, it's great with eggs. Yeah, so there's a lot of options, but could you work veggies, if you're not eating veggies a lot now, could you work them into one additional meal or snack? A snack I had earlier today was just carrots, some almonds, and a couple carrots that I cut up at the beginning of the week and threw in the fridge at work. Bag of mini peppers that come at the store. They're like ready to go veggies. So can you be creative about how you get them in, and seasonality, at least a variety of veggies, so you're not just eating the same one all the time. And then the last one is just drinking enough water. We live in a high altitude environment, and so getting enough water, that our cells have a large component of water. This helps us digest food. I one time had a patient who I just had them drink more water, and they're like, back pain got better. It's kind of wild. So as a general rule, your body weight in ounces divided by 2 is a rough rule, and then more if you feel thirsty a lot or if you're doing a lot of exercise where you're sweating. Okay. Any one of these we could do like a whole semester course on, and so if any one of these you're not sure about, if you are on a specific diet, if you're trying to be more plant-based, if you think you need to be gluten-free, if you have food allergies, autoimmune conditions, registered dietitians are really qualified to help. They have more nutritional training than most physicians, and so really working in tandem with your primary practice and a registered dietitian, or going direct to a registered dietitian, because they'll refer out when they need to. But they can really help make sure if you are needing to eliminate something, they're doing it in the right way, or helping to reintroduce it so you don't have to restrict in the first place. Questions about nutrition? Cool. And there is a place for foods that aren't traditionally healthy. So that's kind of eating intuitively. So not given permission to have, there's kind of sometimes foods, and then there's everyday foods. And so we don't want the fast foods to be everyday foods, but on occasion, our body is pretty resilient. So there's a tendency in our culture to label foods as good or bad. Foods don't really have morality; they're just chemistry, and so our bodies can adapt to some foods here and there, but our bodies will adapt to what we consistently do.
Yeah, and my French fries were a vegetable,
There we go. We'll go with that.
I get you.
Yeah. Here's an example of a plate. And so the wording is a little small, but the pictures are pretty good. So this is Abby's plate of half the plate, if you can, being vegetables. Finding vegetables that you like. If you think you don't like vegetables, she will give challenges to patients to try a new vegetable every week until they find something they like, or find a new way to prepare it. Then your starch or your carbohydrate source, and then your lean protein. And so if you think about visually how to lay out a plate, if you're pretty close to that, then you don't need to do a lot of counting or restriction or measuring or weighing. All right.
The fats are over on the side.
Yeah, they're up there because often they can be used as a topping or as a cooking ingredients or as a flavoring.
They're there, but they're not.
Yeah,
overwhelming.
yeah, because fats are very dense, so they have a lot of energy. Yeah, and then there's some spices at the bottom. Okay, our next one. So we got move, we got eat. Our third one is recover. So as modern humans, we are under a ton of stress, and so we got to find ways to let our bodies recover from that. So sleep is essential. This would be the second big one. So if I could give like 2 advice, it'd be like, from my perspective as a physical therapist, Abby would give a different answer as a dietitian, but I would say, find somebody to help you strength train and then like go to bed. Sleep is correlated with obesity, with diabetes, with knee pain, with back pain, with depression, anxiety. So almost every negative health outcome that we want to avoid sleep deprivation, which is less than 7 hours a night, is associated with that. And so getting to sleep is incredibly important. There's a book called Why We Sleep. It's a little dense, but the science of sleep is fascinating.
It's
So-
the one you suggest for kids with sleep.
He doesn't go to sleep.
I have,
It's ridiculous.
He's doing squats.
it's probably not kids. There's one that's narrated by Samuel L. Jackson. Go there to sleep.
Nice.
It's really
We
funny.
literally last night did lunges to the bedroom.
Why? I don't, unfortunately. But just anecdotally, I think sugar intake, time of day, that happens.
Teach them some meditation.
Yeah, so there's ways to do little meditation routines with kids, just teaching them some breathing, having a routine that kind of you bring in, even ambient stuff that he doesn't have to know about. Could you bring the lights down? Screen time, I don't know if he's on screens, can be important because that kind of keeps the brain awake. Tart cherry juice naturally has melatonin in it, even though it does have a little sugar. Yeah, and so there might be ways you can manipulate, like
If he doesn't meditate, then medicate.
yeah,
There you go.
bring the house down a little bit so it's a little darker.
He was doing a little Kung Fu Panda thing where he was,
That's really
Finding a
cute.
Zen place.
yeah, I forget what he called it.
Yeah. I don't know, unfortunately, a book for sleep about kids. I'll think about that. I'll try to get back to you.
Forget a lot.
Yeah. But anyway, the guy who wrote the book that I read, Why We Sleep, he's like the head of sleep medicine and research at, I think, Stanford or UCLA, somewhere in California. Obviously, he buys because he's a sleep physician, but he says that he thinks not sleeping enough is the biggest public health crisis in the U.S. because it's linked to everything. And if you have problems sleeping, we actually have a great sleep center here in Flagstaff over at Mountain Heart. You should be able to not need to medicate, hopefully. There are some other conditions. Sleep apnea is very common here in Flagstaff because we are at a higher altitude. And it doesn't just affect, usually just historically it was like bigger men with big necks and big chests and kind of associated with obesity. But now they're finding it does show up a lot more common in people who might look fit or all genders, all ages. And so if you're waking up with headaches, if you feel like you're sleeping but not refreshed, there could be something going on. So anyway, look into your sleep and try and prioritize it. It's the hardest thing because everything is trying to get us to not sleep. And so creating a routine where we're shutting devices down, powering them down, avoiding electronic light, that blue light keeps us awake, having a routine around sleep, trying to be a little more consistent about sleep times. But that is another huge one that's part of health. Some others, recovering. So if you have an injury, that could get in the way of your movement. So work on that with usually a physical therapist, I think is the best place to start because you're going to get your best conservative option. And if it's not a traumatic injury, most things can be rehabbed successfully with conservative care. Any GI issues, gastrointestinal issues, food allergies, often those are linked with some other things. So the body becomes more and more sensitive to food allergies or sensitivities as the organism, as you're more stressed. And so if we can nourish you a little bit better, get you to recover, often you can start to tolerate things that previously might have irritated you. Like when I was in grad school and I was not sleeping and not moving enough, big raw salads would really irritate me just because my GI system couldn't process all of that fiber. As I worked with my wife dietitian, we started on some softer foods, some soups, some cooked vegetables, prioritize sleep, prioritize de-stress. I graduated grad school and then things started to recover. So food sensitivities don't have to be a forever type of thing. And then if you are working out, if you're doing some of the movement stuff, giving yourself enough time to recover from that. Overtraining is more rare, I think, than not training at all, but it does happen. And if you're pushing your body hard, you need a couple days a week where you're maybe just taking a nice easy walk or just getting your steps in for that day, but you're not pushing the line as much. And we do see that in Flagstaff because we're a community that wants to be active. So we got move, we got eat, we got recover. Our fourth pillar is connect. And so this is, you brought up some great stuff earlier, but which could fit on this list. But we live in an environment that is very different than how humans evolved. And so if we can get back to that, it shows a ton of health benefits. So unplug. So we are perpetually plugged into our devices. That makes it harder to sleep, and also increases our stress. And stress is not just a mental phenomenon. It changes our physiology. And so our physiology, when we get a stress response, our heart rate increases, our blood pressure increases. We don't digest things as well. We get muscular tension. The body can be more sensitive to pain stimulus. And the body can't differentiate between a modern day stress versus a stress that we might have evolved with of where we're physically in danger. So if my phone is dinging every time I get an email, my brain thinks I'm in danger, even if I'm just checking that thing. And so our phones can give us this sympathetic stress response every couple of minutes that can keep us all ramped up. So if we can unplug and set some boundaries and spend some time away from some of our devices, people tend to feel better. Breathing is another one. And so because we're a little bit more stressed, our breath tends to be more shallow. We tend to breathe a little more rapidly. And so we'll try it right now in a second. If we breathe a little more slowly, we tend to feel better. So everybody just close your eyes, place your hands on your abdomen, just get in a comfortable position, and then take a nice deep breath in through your nose. Pause for a second at the top, and then out comfortably, but maybe a little slower than how you breathe in. Pause at the bottom, and then repeat. We're going to do 3. Inhale. And as you exhale, just see if you can find any muscle tension, maybe in your jaw, your shoulders, your ankles, and just let that go. Let it melt into the chair or the floor. And then inhale. And exhale one more time and see if you can prolong that exhale as long as it's comfortable. And with each moment, release a little more of that tension in your jaw or your shoulders or your neck. And then open your eyes. Cool. I felt like the room just came down a little bit. That sounds a little woody, but we just took a time to pay attention to our breath. So when we slow down the exhale and we breathe in and out through our nose, it actually stimulates a little more nitrous oxide in our blood, which is kind of helps stimulate some relaxation. We stimulate the diaphragm a little more, and then with the slow exhale, we actually stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the counterpart to our stress system. And so just taking a few deep breaths can change your physiology to some extent. Third one is play. So because we're working all the time and we're a little stressed, we forget that life should be fun. There's a study where they looked at some modern hunter-gatherers. I forget what country they were in, but they spent generally, I think it was per day, maybe 4 hours working, doing their hunter and gathering nets. They might have taken a nap. They slept 8 to 9 hours. And then they spent 4 to 6 hours at leisure. So at play, that could have been art, music, storytelling, games. And so obviously modern life, unfortunately, looks a little bit different, but are there times where you can inject an element of play into your work, into your home life? Just playing some games, whether it's doing a crossword puzzle, doing a little sketch, listening to or creating music, for no other reason than it's enjoyable. And can we play without substances or escapism? So can play look not just like Netflix and a bunch of glasses of wine, or some people go to excessive exercise. So something that was once playful, like going for an easy jog or hike, becomes a have to do, and then it's no longer playful. So how can we look at things and make them fun? And so when it comes to the movement, we had some of those movement goals we wanted to hit, but could you kind of roughly keep track of those once you know you're on the right track, and then maybe inject some play into that. So you're not tracking every minute, you're not worried about every heartbeat, every heart rate, but you're kind of being more intuitive and playful with it. Find things that are fun for you. So that one I find is harder than I think it should be for me, certainly, but I think for a lot of people. And then the fourth one here is community. So finding other people who are going to support you on this journey to be healthy. Spending time with others who are positive, supportive, growth-minded, who are playful, and can help you work through some of this stuff in a supportive way. And then managing stress, anxiety, depression, and other mental health conditions. Not be afraid to reach out to a counselor or therapist for help with that. One of our little escapisms, my wife and I, we like to watch Grey's Anatomy. She got me hooked on it, and there's like 18 seasons. And so but one of my pet peeves about that show, if you haven't seen it, that's okay, is they portray mental health counselors as like not having valuable jobs and like something that's a punishment. Like somebody gets in trouble at the hospital at work on a show, and they're like punished by going to the therapist to work through their trauma. And they're like, why can't I operate? And they're like, he didn't sign you up. He's like, fine, I'll go. And it's just like not a real, to me, it's a damaging portrayal of mental health work. And so if you in this room, or if you know somebody who is suffering from stress, anxiety, depression, even if they're having a hard time and there's not a label to it. When we were starting our business, it was very stressful, and I saw a counselor about a year. I don't have a named condition, but I found it incredibly helpful. And so breaking the stigma of getting some support for mental health. Our brain is our most complex organism, way more complex than a knee, but people go to therapy for their knee all the time. That's what I do. But can we encourage that in others or in ourselves if that is something? And even if you're just curious, finding somebody, just explore that for a couple sessions. There's almost no downside. Sorry, that was my soapbox on mental health stuff. Yeah. But that's kind of a key piece. If you can't connect or can't de-stress, finding somebody to help you with tools to do it. The fifth pillar, this one's often can be the easiest or the most straightforward, but we want to generally avoid or manage the stuff that we know is bad. So this is the closest we get at EVOLVE to restriction, and generally want to avoid the things that are known to be disease causing. And so first is understanding your family health history. So there's a ton of genetic tests out now, but knowing your family health history is actually a better predictor than getting some genetic test done. So if you are adopted or don't know your biological family, that is tough. And so there's unfortunately not much you can do there. So genetic testing could help. But if you are lucky to have family that you can explore that with, just asking questions, being inquisitive so you can know what your risks are. We have somebody at our gym, he's another guy who like looks fit. He's kind of tall, he comes in, he works out. He's got the movement piece down. He's very consistent in the gym, but he's 29. He just in the past year had 2 of his uncles who were in their early 50s pass away from unexpected heart attacks. And so we saw him, and we did some interventions. We got him eating a little better. We helped him manage his stress. We looked at what is his overall risk profile for cardiac stuff, because he looked healthy, but looks can be deceiving, and he got the movement piece down, but he was missing a bunch of these other pillars. So if you can, know your family health history. Second is monitor some key biomarkers with a health professional. So your family practice doctor can often do this, but sometimes they don't, so you can ask for it. So making sure you're checking in on blood pressure. I, at least every couple of years, even though it's not usually indicated, I do ask for a set of basic lab panel. If you are close to being diabetic or something like that, you want to just manage those things and keep an eye on them and watch how they trend over the time. Because I know my dad, he was like, yeah, I turned 40 and my cholesterol was a little high. And I was like, well, did you ever have it checked beforehand? And he's like, I don't think so. And so I'm willing to bet if he checked it when he was 25, 30, 35, 40, we would have seen a trend, and he might have been able to intervene sooner. So I think just checking in on this stuff, there's a debate in the public health field of how often you need to do the tests and the expense to the population. And that's it's tricky when we look at the cost of healthcare and all that. But if you have the means, where your doctor's willing, at least every couple of years, checking in on some things. And then if there's issues, checking in more often. Managing any injury risk factors, and so this is where in your movement practice, however you move, there should be, there's ways of moving that that are correlated with injuries. And so injuries are big because they're going to make you stop moving, and they can contribute to mental health things. And then limiting activities that are known to cause disease. These are kind of the big ones of substance use or abuse. So overusing alcohol, smoking, things like that. And then I do have, unfortunately, some sugar sweetened beverages, so generally soda on there. Not to never have it, period, but daily consumption of soda or sugar sweetened beverages, which could be a grande Starbucks with a bunch of pumps of syrup in there. But sugar sweetened beverages, that's like mainline in the sugar. It gets into our system really fast and is associated with a lot of things. So if we can limit how often we're drinking our sugar, that's probably going to be good for us. Yeah, so we want to prevent the things that we can prevent. We can't prevent everything, and if that's why pillars 1 through 4, we want to reduce the risk. Cool. So where do we start with all this? Let's say you're doing 0 of these pillars. We'll start small and easy. So remember, consistency is better than intensity. Find something I'd rather have you start with something you're like, what's one change I can make next week that sounds too easy? There's a behavior change psychologist out of Stanford. I think his name is B.J. Fogg. But he classically talks about how to get people to floss their teeth. He said the goal shouldn't be to floss all of your teeth every day. Set the goal of flossing 1 tooth. It's so easy and so silly that everybody's like, yeah, I could do that. But by the time you get the thing out in there, you're like, okay, I'll just do them all. Or maybe you're tired and you're just building momentum. You do the one you put away, but it's still out. And then maybe next week you already got one. Let's just do a second one while we're there. But if you're like, oh, I got to do the thing, I haven't practiced, it's hard to get back there, you make all these excuses to not do it. And so if you can just start too easy and then make it just a little bit harder. So with nutrition, you're not going to overhaul all your diet tomorrow, but is there one meal or snack you could add a little bit more vegetables to? Or is there one time per day you could drink one less sugar sweetened beverage? So what is something that sounds very achievable, and start there? Track the habit. So make it something that it's a clear, I did it or I did it. Did you floss that tooth or not? How many sodas did you have today versus last week? Make it something that's objective rather than subjective. And then if you're not sure where to start, add rather than subtract. So much, and I know I just gave an example about sodas, not really a bad example, but so much about particularly nutrition, but being healthy in general is about restriction. We got to eliminate the bad. But there's so much we can do to add good. And so if we can just add some positive influences, that often feels better because I'm not trying to take away the things you love, but can we add in some other things to counteract or just to make your life more full? Find teammates, so don't do it alone. Mutual accountability and support will help you be consistent. And then once the habit becomes fairly automatic, once it becomes really easy, then you progress and take one more step forward. And if you're not sure where to start, which pillar sounds most exciting or most fun? Just start there. Sleep. There we go. And so maybe can we use you as an example?
Yeah.
So how much do you normally get to sleep now?
I don't even know.
Yeah.
It's like off and on sleep.
You're in school, and it sounds like you have kids
School,
too.
work, and my son.
Yeah.
And then my boyfriend works nights, so he's coming in during the night.
Yeah, that's tough. And so maybe a place to start would be, could you design your sleep environment to protect a set of hours? Maybe you're not trying to sleep more yet, but you're trying to make it higher density sleep. So that's more uninterrupted sleep. Or maybe you just look for, can I get an extra 15 minutes more consistently? Or could I shut down devices 30 minutes? So it could be, you don't have to go from 4 hours of sleep to 8 hours of sleep, because that's a huge change. But can you just pick one little thing that's going to move you in that direction?
My body definitely tries to make me sleep better.
Yeah, it's like, we're not letting up. Cool. And then, will you be able to send these slides out?
I can. So I need a piece of paper though, because if you want it, I need email addresses, and of course it'll be for a sign-in sheet for once. Yeah, if we could use the back of one of the little flyers or something,
Here's another one.
just lovely. And then I'd be happy to send that out. Yeah.
But we have a little checklist on here that just kind of gives you things. You can put this on your fridge or on your desk, and just start with the ones that are most exciting, and then make it almost a, you know, if we had a little play, a joke, and you make it, yeah.
Oh no, I was just gonna
Oh.
say, so there is an app that I just installed on my phone called Loop Habit Tracker.
Cool.
And it's actually like you say what thing you want to do, and then it actually shows you visually when you're on a streak. So every day I can see the check mark that, okay, I did my morning meditation. So one of the things I have on there is like, did you at least do like a set of push-ups? Like you
Yeah.
don't have to do a ton, but it's so satisfying to hit the little check mark every day.
What's
So-
that app called? Loop Habit?
Loop Habit Tracker,
Cool.
and mine's on an Android phone, so it's probably on Apple too. since
Yeah.
everything's on
There's a real
Apple.
study that if you can check things off, it improves your consistency and your adherence. Like, yeah.
At the hospital, I work at the hospital. We use Virgin Pulse, which is that sounds similar, and it gives you a little check mark afterwards too. And that one I think you have to pay for, but I don't just because I work at the hospital. But I also use, it's called Fabulous.
I've heard of that one.
And I have used that since they started,
Mhm.
and I absolutely love it. That one,
Cool.
they've become more of a paid thing, but they do have things that you can do that are not paid, and they have little things. Just, you know, drink a big glass of water or a full glass of water in the morning, first thing
Yeah.
as soon as you wake up, and then it gives you the reasons
Cool.
and tells you that not to go too quickly, just to take the small steps and why, and it explains everything. It's
Yeah.
really, I really think it's a great app.
That's awesome.
Virgin Pulse is great too.
Awesome.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Probably
Yeah.
more expensive.
Yeah. And then, yeah.
I don't know how to say this, but do you find ever with people that you're trying to help that when they're trying to change a habit that it's on their mind and they know they should do it and they know the reasons that they should do it, but it becomes like the main focus all day. So example, if somebody's trying to lose weight, then they're more, the harder they try, the harder it is to do it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm
Yeah,
expressing
yeah,
that.
I get you.
That it's like their mind is just totally on it. So many times, like I
It's
know I
almost
should
creating
do
some
it.
stress or anxiety because you're always
How,
thinking about
how
it.
do you kind of get out of that rut or that track to try to change the habit?
Yeah, so a few things. One is I would start with so when we set goals. So one, it should be something that is so there's first is making sure you have the right habit or the right goal, and so we try to differentiate between like a behavior goal and an outcome goal. And so an outcome goal would be something like losing 10 pounds. So that's an outcome you want to achieve. We would maybe dig deeper with the person as to why do you want to achieve that? Is it really the weight that's important, or is it playing with your grandkids, or is it being able to run a 5K, or is it feeling strong in your body? And so we try to take an outcome goal and we try to dig 3 levels down and make sure that we have a strong motivation. That's the root motivation, because often that's why we started at the beginning of what is health, because usually if we're focused on what the root cause is, then it's some powerful kind of internal thing. So we try to get there if we can. But then we want to pair that outcome goal with what we call a behavior goal. So the tricky thing, we'll just lose 10 pounds as an example. There are a ton of factors that would play into somebody's ability to achieve that or not. And so that could be sleep, what they're eating, how much they're moving, their genetics, their age, their metabolism. Some of those factors you can control and some of them can't. And so it's hard to know if you're seeing progress if it's because of what you're doing or some other factor. And so I find that a key is, can we distill it down to a behavior goal is, what is the one thing I want you to do today? And then once you do it, usually the stress starts to subside. And so can we get you doing one exercise and you guys check that box? Or can we get you drinking a glass of water? And then that becomes automatic. We have one more thing. And so we just try to distill it from, here's a kind of vague goal, and then there's 10 things I'm thinking about, but what is the most important thing I need to do today? I'm going to prioritize that, and then I don't have to stress about it. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but that's usually the approach I take. I get that way about our business. It runs in my brain, and I find if I say, okay, I prioritize what is the most important thing I have to do today, and then I just try and focus only on that thing, and I trust the process. I trust the plan. So here's my goal. That's all the way down there. What am I going to do today? And so sometimes helping somebody or working with somebody to help you with that plan can eliminate some of that stress, so you're not always thinking about it. I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah. But yeah, but tracking the habit can be helpful, and just pen and paper too. I love the apps, but if you're not an app person or you're trying to get away from your device a little more, the classic, I don't know if anybody watched Seinfeld, but I grew up watching Seinfeld. One episode he wanted to write a joke a day, and he's just a calendar. He would write a joke and he would exit off. After he got a couple, he didn't want to break the chain. The whole episode was how he wanted it to not break the chain. And it's simple, but it really does work. But anyway, you can kind of use this as a template, as a roadmap. So maybe you're going to start with sleep. And then you don't have to stay in one box. Maybe then you want to work on a little more play and connection. Or maybe then you want to work on a little aerobic. But if you wanted to say, let's say, make 2020 your healthiest year ever, if you tried to each month just check off one box here, and that's your goal for the month, I'm willing to bet you'll feel different at the end than you did at the beginning. So that could be a place to start. If you need help with any of this, that's why we created what we do. So I'm a physical therapist, so I'm kind of in the movement and injury rehab piece. My wife, Abby, is a registered dietitian, and so she deals with everything, chronic medical conditions to body image concerns to fueling for performance. And then we also help people to move better. We have a whole gym program where you don't have to be injured, and we have everybody right now from age 20 to somebody who's 75. And so we can design the right program for you. So if you need any help with any of this, let us know. And then if we're not the right person, I'll try and get you to the right person. We don't have mental health, for example, but often healthcare can be overwhelming. So that's my personal email. If you need anywhere, just resources, or you're not sure where to get started, I'm happy to chat today, or chat over the phone, or shoot you some resources. Any questions before we go tonight? I can hang out as late as we need to.
Once you hear now.
Okay, fair. And then we do have, I don't want to sales pitch for our business, but we do have a meal prep program too. If you're struggling to eat healthy or cooking is hard, we kind of created all of our services by ourselves as our own customers. So it's nice not to make lunch every day and get some veggies in your day. But yeah, reach out anytime if you need anything.
Thank you.
Thank you.